Welcome to Honeybee, real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. My name is Jamie. People often say revenge tastes best when served cold. What they don't mention is how deeply satisfying it feels to watch the very person who shattered your life slowly realize they've been defeated at their own game. I'll never forget the moment outside the courthouse when Kendall glared at me, her eyes blazing with hatred, and called me the devil. I simply smiled and told her the truth, that she had brought that side of me out. That moment was 7 years in the making. Every single day of those 7 years had been worth the wait. Kendall had always been breathtaking. At 5'7", she had the kind of beauty and elegance that could draw attention in any room. Even after years of marriage, I woke up each morning still feeling lucky to see her lying beside me. Her smile, the very thing that first caught my eye, was unforgettable. I first noticed it years earlier at a business networking event. She was radiant, magnetic, and I couldn't look away. In the early years of our marriage, life seemed picture perfect. We owned a beautiful 4-bedroom home in one of the city's most coveted neighborhoods, complete with a 3-car garage. I had built a solid career in commercial real estate development, focusing on projects that blended retail, office, and residential spaces into vibrant communities. Business had been especially rewarding during the boom years, when everyone wanted to live in upscale, walkable neighborhoods filled with amenities. Kendall didn't need to work, but she kept herself busy with social activities, charitable projects, and events that gave her both purpose and recognition. Financially, we never worried. I had made smart choices early in my career, spreading our wealth across commercial properties, blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, and private equity ventures. Over time, these investments grew substantially. Our assets were well diversified and carefully placed into different business entities for tax and protection purposes. We weren't flashy with our wealth, though we had far more than most people our age. Kendall understood we were comfortable and secure, but she never took much interest in how it was all managed. She trusted me completely with the business side of our lives, while she focused on our home, our social calendar, and her charitable commitments. That arrangement worked well for a long time. I loved the challenge of managing complex investments, while she thrived at creating the lifestyle and social connections that elevated both our personal and professional lives. But over the years, something changed. At first, it was subtle. Kendall became a little more distant, distracted. She began spending more time away from home, answering phone calls privately, and carrying an air of preoccupation. When we were together, it wasn't dramatic enough to sound alarms, but I noticed she still participated in our usual routines. Yet there was an undercurrent of tension. When I asked what was wrong, she brushed off my concerns with vague explanations. She told me her committee work had become more demanding, that personality conflicts among volunteers were draining her energy. Her reasons sounded reasonable enough. Kendall had always been deeply involved in her causes, so I believed her. I trusted her, but the distance between us kept widening. Conversations that once went deep now skimmed the surface, revolving around household schedules or social obligations instead of dreams, worries, or plans. Physical closeness faded, too. More often than not, she'd say she was too tired or distracted, and even when we sat together, I could feel her mind drifting elsewhere. At dinner, during our nightly chats, her body was present, but her thoughts were clearly somewhere else. Weeks of this strained silence finally became unbearable. One quiet Saturday night, with no parties, no commitments, I decided to press for the truth. I opened a bottle of her favorite wine and told her gently that I knew something was wrong. I said pretending everything was fine wasn't helping either of us. Whatever the issue was, I told her we could face it together, but only if she was honest. At first, she repeated the same dismissive reassurances. I'm fine. You're just overthinking. But I could see the cracks, her tense expression, her refusal to meet my eyes. Finally, I told her directly. I knew she was hiding something. That's when she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed she had been having an affair. But that revelation was only the surface of something far more complicated. Through sobs, Kendall explained the affair had started months ago as an emotional connection that grew into something physical. But recently, it had taken a darker turn. The man she'd been seeing had explicit photos of them together, and he was now using them to blackmail her. He threatened to send them to me, to her family, and even the board she served on if she didn't give him money and continued access. She was terrified. The thought of those photos being exposed haunted her. The man's demands kept escalating. More money, more leverage, and she was crumbling under the pressure. When I asked who it was, her answer hit me like a punch to the chest. It was someone she had introduced me to months earlier at a gathering. I had told her then that I didn't trust him, that I didn't like how close he was to her. She had laughed off my concerns, saying he was just a harmless friend. And yet, he was the one she had chosen. The betrayal cut deeper than I could put into words. She hadn't just broken her vows. She had done so with the very man I had warned her about. Still, I forced myself to stay calm while she explained everything. Inside, I was breaking apart. The woman I loved had chosen to ignore my instincts, my concerns, and now she was trapped in a dangerous situation of her own making. Beyond my devastation, I recognized the seriousness of the crime. Blackmail is no small matter. It's a felony. As much as I wanted to collapse under the weight of her betrayal, I also knew my immediate priority was to protect her from this man's threats. I told her we needed to involve my attorney and law enforcement immediately. At first, she resisted. She feared the humiliation, the scandal. But I explained that paying a blackmailer only makes things worse. It never ends. The only way to stop him was to expose him legally. Reluctantly, she agreed. My attorney, who specialized in discreet matters, coordinated with investigators. They gathered evidence, messages, threats, bank records. Warrants were issued. When police arrested the man, David, he denied everything at first, insisting Kendall had given him money willingly. But the evidence crushed his lies. Threatening texts, explicit demands, financial records. It was all there. The case moved through the courts. Eventually, David pled guilty to blackmail in exchange for a lighter sentence. The nightmare of his threats was over, but the damage to our marriage remained. Kendall begged me to forgive her. She clung to me, desperate to rebuild what she had broken. I thought seriously about divorce then. The affair itself was a wound, but what cut even deeper was that she had chosen the very man I had warned her about. It felt deliberate, calculated. But as I weighed my options, I started thinking about the financial implications. After years together, our assets had grown tremendously. If I divorced her immediately, emotions high, she would likely walk away with half. Millions. The idea of handing over half my life's work to the woman who betrayed me was intolerable. So I began to think differently. What if I played the long game? What if I restructured everything before I walked away? That was the birth of my plan. When Kendall suggested marriage counseling, I agreed eagerly. To her, it was a lifeline. To me, it was cover. Counseling bought me time. It gave me a chance to restructure our finances, to move our assets in ways that appeared legitimate, strategic, even beneficial, but were in reality designed to shield what I had built. In sessions, I played the role of the wounded but forgiving husband. I listened, nodded, shared, and pretended to rebuild. She praised me for not abandoning her during her darkest time. She called me her rock, her savior. And all the while, I was carefully, methodically dismantling her claim to my wealth. Behind closed doors, I was meeting with attorneys, accountants, and financial advisors. Every move had to look clean, justified, and legally sound. I created new business entities, shifted investments, and convinced Kendall these changes were to protect us from lawsuits or downturns. She believed me. She even signed documents I put in front of her without hesitation. Routine, she thought. One of those documents was a power of attorney, granting me sweeping authority over our assets. She signed it without consulting anyone. Trust, after all, had always been her weakness. And so, the game began. For the next several years, I lived two lives. To Kendall, I was a wounded but forgiving husband, trying to rebuild what she had broken. In counseling sessions, I spoke with sincerity, showed patience, and pretended to open my heart again. She believed every word. She believed I was healing. But behind that mask, I was meticulous, calculated, and utterly focused. with my attorney and advisors. I carefully shifted assets into structures that looked like legitimate business strategies. Properties were transferred into holding companies. Investments were moved into entities Kendall had no claim to, and accounts were consolidated under my sole authority. Each move was perfectly documented with reasonable explanations. Better tax efficiency, risk protection, diversification. Kendall signed every paper I placed in front of her. She thought she was helping me streamline business, protecting our future. In truth, she was surrendering her financial access one signature at a time. The counseling served its purpose as well. On paper, I was making every effort to save the marriage, something any future court would see as good faith. To Kendall, my participation meant hope. She poured herself into the process, clinging to the idea that our love could survive. She told me often how grateful she was that I hadn't abandoned her when she was at her lowest. I smiled, nodded, and kept playing my role. Over time, her guilt seemed to transform into devotion. She became more attentive, more affectionate, as though she could erase the past by drowning me in loyalty. She thought I was moving forward with her. But the truth was, I was only moving forward with my plan. The restructuring was slow, deliberate, and flawless. Assets were moved overseas, placed in entities she had no stake in, invested through vehicles she couldn't touch. It was all legal, all above board, but designed so that when the time came, there would be nothing left for her to claim. It took 6 years. 6 long years of patience, strategy, and performance. During those years, Kendall lived under the illusion that we were rebuilding. She thought our counseling sessions were strengthening our bond. She believed I had forgiven her. And then, when every detail of the plan was secured, I ended it. The divorce papers were served while she was at home. She called me immediately, panic in her voice, begging to understand why. I told her calmly, I had never forgiven her. Counseling had been for me, not us. It gave me time to decide, to prepare, to plan. And now I was ready to move on. Her shock quickly turned to rage. She scrambled to find a lawyer, convinced she would walk away with millions. But as her attorney dug into the case, the reality became clear. The vast majority of our assets were locked away in entities she had no legal right to. The power of attorney she had signed meant she had no control over accounts. She was boxed out of everything she assumed she would inherit through divorce. Her attorney tried everything, arguing that my restructuring had been done in anticipation of divorce, that the transfers should be reversed. But because I had spent years building it, piece by piece, each with legitimate reasons, there was nothing they could prove. Every move looked like normal business. Every justification was airtight. As the months dragged on, her desperation grew. She accused me of manipulation, cruelty, of being cold and calculating. She wasn't wrong, but she had mistaken my patience for weakness, my silence for forgiveness. The divorce stretched for over a year. Her lawyers fought, but the walls I had built held firm. By the end, Kendall's settlement was a fraction of what it could have been years earlier. Instead of millions, she walked away with enough to maintain a modest lifestyle, comfortable, but far from the life she had imagined. On the final day, when the divorce was finalized and the last papers were signed, I saw her outside the courthouse. She looked at me with pure venom in her eyes and hissed, "You're the devil." I smiled. I told her the truth, that she was the one who had created that devil. Her betrayal, her choices, her arrogance, they had forged a man standing in front of her. I reminded her that everything I had done was legal, every document signed by her own hand. She had trusted me to handle our finances, just as I had once trusted her to honor our marriage vows. Both of us had misplaced our trust, but only one of us had learned how to use it to their advantage. Walking away from that courthouse, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Satisfaction. Not joy, not triumph, but a deep, steady sense of balance. Kendall had destroyed our marriage with her choices. I had destroyed her financial future with mine. Some would call what I did cruel. Some would say I went too far. But to me, it was justice. She gambled with our marriage, and I played a better game with our assets. She sought fleeting passion with a man who turned out to be a criminal. I sought long-term victory measured not in moments, but in millions. She had underestimated me. That was her mistake. The woman who once made me feel like the luckiest man alive taught me lessons I'll never forget. Never give blind trust. Always plan for betrayal. And never underestimate the value of patience. She broke my heart. But in doing so, she made me sharper, harder, and far more strategic. Today I am free. Free from a woman who proved unworthy of my love. And stronger because of the game she forced me to play. The devil she claimed I became was nothing more than a reflection of her own choices. Revenge, they say, is best served cold. But I learned something else. It's even sweeter when prepared carefully with patience, strategy, and precision. Kendall thought she was playing with my heart. Instead, I was playing with her future. And when the final score was tallied, the numbers didn't lie. She lost everything that mattered. I walked away with everything I had built. In the end, we both got exactly what we deserved.